Hello, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to talk with you about the legislation that's ongoing around limiting the use of firefighting foam that contained perfluorinated compounds. My name is Nancy Buermeyer, and I work for the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. We're a national organization, and our sole mission is to try to prevent breast cancer by reducing or eliminating exposures to toxic chemicals and radiation that's linked to the disease. We're a national organization. We work in a number of different ways. We do a lot of public education. We also do market campaigns where we work to get companies to voluntarily remove chemicals from their products, make safer products. And we also work in the policy realm, and we do that both through legislation and regulatory action. And we also work at both the state and the federal level. And because we're located in California, we do a lot of our legislative state work here in this state. I want to talk to you today about the concerns around firefighting foam that contains perfluorinated compounds. As you've heard from other presentations earlier, PFAS chemicals are referred to as forever chemicals because they never break down in the environment. So every time you add a different exposure or different release to the environment, it just continually builds up and doesn't break down literally for thousands of years. PFAS are very toxic, including at very low doses. There are a number of health issues that are listed here. Our focus obviously would be on the breast cancer piece of that, and there is science showing that some of these perfluorinated compounds have been linked to breast cancer. The use of these foams increases firefighter exposure, which is part of what this study was designed to look at, and we've heard some of those results. But it's also a major source of water contamination. And in California alone, the estimates suggest that approximately 19 million Californians have been impacted by water systems that have been contaminated by PFAS. And that number is expected to go up as more testing happens. So based on those concerns, there's been a good bit of legislative activity, some of it at the congressional level. Congress has acted in a couple of different ways. As you probably know, airports are required to use foams that contain PFAS. And Congress has instructed the Federal Aviation Administration to end that requirement by October 2021. Airports would still be permitted to use PFAS foams, but they would not be required to. Additionally, Congress took action to get the military, who is a major user of these products, to phase out of PFAS foam in 2024. So those are two really important steps that's happened at the federal level, but there's also been a lot of activity at the state level, and I want to talk about that for a minute. There are 5 current laws on the books. You can see the states here: California, Colorado, New Hampshire, New York, and Washington. Most of these laws have a basic structure to them. They ban the sale and manufacturing of PFAS foams in the state. They ban the use in training of these foams. There's a provision that requires purchasers to be notified if there's PFAS in the firefighting gear that they're buying. So it's not a prohibition, it's a right to know whether there's PFAS in that gear. And then all of the laws have an exemption for the federal requirements for airports to use PFAS foams. And then they also have exemptions or extensions for refineries and chemical plants. So that's kind of the basic blueprint of these laws. I want to talk for a minute about the California law and point out what some of the similarities and differences are in that bill. In California, we typically call our bills by the bill number. So in this case, it's SB 1044. It was authored by a senator from Santa Monica, Ben Allen. And in California, in addition to the author, we have organizations who can sign on as co-sponsors to officially indicate their support and advocacy for the bill. So Breast Cancer Prevention Partners was a co-sponsor of this bill, as was the California Professional Firefighters, which is the state union for firefighters, Clean Water Action, NRDC, and Environmental Working Group. And even though we have a fairly polarized state legislature, as many states across the country do, we were able to get this bill through basically unanimously through all of the committee votes and through the floor votes on both the Senate and the Assembly. So there was an enormous amount of support for the legislation. And once we got it through the legislature, the governor signed the bill on September 29th. So what were some of the provisions in here that might be both similar and different from the other laws? So it certainly prohibited manufacture and sale, but it also prohibited the use of PFAS foams after January 2022. And that would apply mostly to municipal fire departments because, as you'll see, there's exemptions for other uses. As with the others, it bans use in training. There's also a provision that requires manufacturers to recall and reimburse departments for foam that is sold to the fire department after January 2021. So basically, if a fire department were to purchase foam between the beginning of next year and January 2022, when the use prohibition goes into place, that foam would have to be recalled and reimbursed, and the fire department reimbursed for the cost of it, which is a good thing for fire departments, and we strongly support. The challenge is that there's no particularly good way to dispose of this product. Because these chemicals are so persistent, they're very difficult to destroy. So when you're talking about unused foam, the ways that people typically try to dispose of them is either through incineration or through landfills. Now, incinerators and landfills are often located next to or in communities that are already overburdened with toxic exposures, so what we refer to as environmental justice communities. And unfortunately, when you try to burn PFAS, you end up just pumping those chemicals out into the air and into the local community. And often when these chemicals get buried in landfills, they can leach into the water system and contaminate people's drinking water. So it's a huge problem. And so what our law requires is that companies safely transport and store this foam until our California EPA comes up with a scientifically sound and safe way to dispose of these foams. So that's a provision in there that was really important to us. And then we do have an extension for refineries and chemical plants. And we also have the notification provision in there that we've talked about for the other laws. Now, those are the 5 states that have actually passed laws. There are a number of other states that have had a lot of activity around legislation in this area, which indicates how much interest and support there is for trying to get these foams out of circulation and replaced by safer alternatives that are already out there and available. So these are the states that introduced legislation just in this past legislative session. And as you'll see, most of them have a similar blueprint to what I spoke about before, but there are a couple of bills that were out there that had different kinds of provisions. So in Massachusetts, it was the gear notification only. In New Hampshire, they tried to create a registry so that whenever these PFAS foams were used, the state would have to be notified so they could keep track of those releases. In New York, they did pass the law prohibiting sale and manufacture of foams in the state, but they also passed a bill that would prohibit incineration of these products for the reasons that I talked about a little bit ago. And that one is sitting on the governor's desk, so we'll see what he decides to do in the next couple of months. And then Wisconsin looked to set up a state storage system. So just as I said, we don't want these foams to be disposed of in a way that impacts environmental justice communities. Wisconsin advocates tried to set up a system where the foams could be turned into the state and the state would store them until an appropriate disposal process was identified. So that gives you a smattering of sort of what's out there. This was the last legislative session. I don't know whether there will be all of the same bills in the next legislative session, but Suffice to say, there's a lot of interest and energy around trying to get the perfluorinated foams out of circulation and again have them replaced with safe and available alternatives. So with that, I will stop and give folks an opportunity to share thoughts or information or ask questions. And if you'd like to reach us, that's our website and my personal email. Thanks very much.